Okay, now you're live.
All right.
Hello, hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hopefully you guys are out there. Please log
Hopefully.
on and say hi.
Yep, let us know you're there.
We're
so
trying-
make sure we set everything up all right.
Trying a little
So
different technical setup. So
It's here Thursday night, and we are in Bible Discovery Group, amongst other places.
live.exclaim.org, 146.church, our YouTube channel, which is Foundations in Creation /242 Ministries.
Yep.
Lori Hoyt's first one I saw
Hey,
logged on.
Lori.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
Excuse this. Will I move that out of the way? Okay. Now we can see. There
There.
we go.
Angie.
Angie's there.
How's everything in Ohio land,
Hi, Lori.
Angie?
Angie.
Hopefully it's going well there in Ohio.
Yeah.
Having a nice summer, I hope. I'm trying to turn all the volumes down.
Yeah, we don't want
Sorry.
background music. Oh, Miss Catherine's on board. Hi, Miss
Catherine, I saw that here. Hi,
So,
Catherine.
good. Thanks for joining us. So,
Oh, howdy from Texas.
howdy from Texas.
How y'all doing?
Howdy, the appropriate response.
Howdy.
So let's see. This over
Important to
here.
see you guys.
Don't want to do that.
What?
Try and clear that. Nope.
You're over here.
Yep. Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good. So.
Well, that's. Hi, Marie. How are you? Ohio is
Hey.
great.
See,
Oh, cooler this week in Ohio. That's good to hear.
good. Sardinas are here.
Yeah.
So.
We don't really need the arrow over here
Okay.
unless you're going to go to
Nope.
the full
No, I
scripture.
think we'll stay
full
on the split
screen?
screen tonight.
I'm just saying, because otherwise we have to keep it over here so we can refresh it.
So Brian's on
That's
board.
why it might be easier to use this one, because
So,
it's kind of
okay.
hard to use this one.
We'll see.
Anyway,
We're getting it. So, but we are here. We are going to be covering the second part of chapter 21. Okay, and if you'll recall, hey, Miss Carolyn's on board.
Carolyn,
Hi, Miss Carolyn. Thanks for joining us.
Brian,
So, if
Sardinas.
you recall, last week was a bit difficult. It was a very difficult topic, but the Bible is not afraid of confronting the difficulties in our lives. And
I was reading in another Exodus commentary. I have one by, I think the last name is Riken. It's a really
Oh,
thick.
yeah,
It's this
yeah, it's
3-inch.
huge. It's
Well, it's
huge.
3 inches thick, but the
Yeah.
book is not very big, so you could have. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's thick. But I was just reading like the intro to chapter 21 the other day, and he was saying how a lot of Bible commentators actually just sort of skip 21, 22, and 23
Right.
because it's a lot of detailed laws and regulations for day-to-day living amongst the Hebrew people. And it's true, this is the part that because Jesus has come, we're not necessarily under every detail of this law any
Right,
longer.
right.
However, it is important to
Absolutely.
examine it and work through it verse by verse. And I was kind of surprised, like to see that, but I have encountered that. A couple of my
Yeah.
regular people, my regular sources have they did the intro to 21 and then they skipped to the end of 23.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, really? But they said, we're going to do those details in a different way, but
Yeah,
they just didn't
they
work through
don't.
it with the whole congregation in their normal format. So anyway, it is a little, it's not really tedious, but
not
it's very
tedious,
detailed.
But it's uncomfortable. It's
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
and some of the
so-
concepts are a little controversial. So,
Oh, there's Robin. Hi, Robin.
hi, Robin.
We were getting a little worried. Didn't
got your
see
car
you
fixed.
Sign on. So I'm glad you got your car fixed.
Oh,
so
whew,
thank
that's-
you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Miss Catherine, I hope you are all staying cool. It's 108 where you are.
Ooh,
Yikes.
108.
So.
wow.
And Miss Lori says her birthday is on Tuesday.
Oh,
Well,
happy birthday, Lori.
Happy early birthday, Lori.
Oh, speaking of things coming up, this Sunday at the Light, Pastor Dan and myself and Pastor David, who's the lead pastor of the Light, are going to team teach on the topic of persistent prayer.
So we'll be tag preaching. So
Team teaching.
tag teaching. Go.
I'm gonna tag you.
Go.
Anyway, so that's the plan for the moment. So just to let you guys know that, I know people
Right.
often ask what's on the schedule for this
Right,
Sunday.
right.
So that's 10 a.m. and they meet in Signal Hill at
Right.
a dance studio called what's it
Level
called?
up
Level Up. Level Up Dance Studio on Willow.
on Willow and Signal Hill.
And
right.
Signal Hill.
And
So-
soon, very soon, right where we are now, hopefully we'll be opening up to having public services. Right now, where there's still anxiously awaiting permitting and such and such. So
Right.
can't have public services yet, but
Well,
that
they
doesn't mean,
announced last week that we were meeting here,
Yeah.
but it's not a grand opening or anything.
Right.
It's just a small group of
Right.
people at 5 o'clock, 5 p.m., and that's at 5948 Westminster Boulevard.
Yep. And so you might be praising the Lord and to be handed a broom.
Yeah,
So
sort of. I mean, if you watch online, you can see. We are supposed to be team preaching and everything, covering for the Carnicks at the 5 o'clock church here on August 14th.
Oh,
So if you want to
true.
pencil that in and come and join us that Sunday, August 14th at 5 p.m., we would love to have you because we're going to need extra hands and help. Yeah,
Absolutely.
the address is 5948 Westminster Boulevard in the city of Westminster.
right on the, what is this? The southwest corner of Westminster Boulevard and Springdale.
Yeah, it's in a strip mall. So
Yeah. So
next
but
to a
anyway,
fish and chips place and some really interesting
great
places
taco
to eat.
place.
A good
and
taco place.
Really good donuts.
It's called Fresh
Anyway,
Co. or something.
we digress.
Anyway.
Okay.
Oh, and a beauty supply, which is always closed. So.
Right. So. But as we were saying, we are going to cover the second half of chapter 21. And Gay is right. A lot of commentators kind of shy away from, a lot of commentators shy away from these couple of chapters because they do address some, shall we say, sensitive topics, slavery. But hopefully, Gay and I did an adequate job of explaining the fundamental differences with the way the Hebrews considered slavery, and servitude would be a better word than slavery.
Right.
And God didn't shy away from it, so we're not going to shy away from it. So,
Exactly.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Dan was foggy. He was
Yeah,
in a fog.
I had a, yeah.
Some reason he was in a
So
fog.
It's in the Bible. It's in our study. We cannot shy away from the uncomfortable topics.
Right.
The Bible, people either are a little bit repulsed by sections in the Bible that talk about sensitive topics like sexuality and or outlining marriage and or slavery and things of that nature, and we can't do that. We can't do that. Nor will we shy away from talking about hell. It's become,
Because it's real.
It's real, and you do not want to go there. And the only way to not go there is to place your faith and trust and confidence in Jesus Christ
Right.
as our Lord and Savior.
He is
And
the
we will
one way.
never, ever stop saying that. None of the book knowledge, none of the so-called culturally acceptable mannerisms, nothing will save you from hell except placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, confessing your sins and repenting and turning to Him as your salvation.
Right, which is the verse that the new church that this broadcast is housed in, 14:6, is from John 14:6, which is, Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That is 14:6 Church. And
End
so
of story.
it's super exciting to be part of this as they're, relaunching and branding a new church essentially here in Westminster. And so please keep that in your prayers. Pastor Paul and Tina Karnick are the lead pastors. If you go onto their YouTube channel, I'll try to post the link a little bit later, or I posted it at the end of last week's study. If you can go to their YouTube channel and to our YouTube channel at Foundations in Creation, both of us, if we reach 100 subscribers, then it gives us a couple more features on the YouTube channel that allows us to interact with people more through that venue. So all that to say, we'd appreciate it if you could log on and subscribe to the 14:6 Church channel and to our channel, and I'll try to put that in if I can, or if you look at last week's study, it's on there, or I'll post it again. But please consider doing that. We'd appreciate it, and if you could like and share, because once we reach that 100 subscribers, there's no financial gain here on our part. It just
Absolutely
actually
not.
gives us some access to features that are helpful.
Right.
According to Pastor Paul, who's my trainer on all
Yeah,
this stuff.
he's our mentor.
I have no
he's
idea.
our mentor in a lot of this online broadcasting.
Yeah, we're so thankful
stuff.
for him because he's really good at all this stuff. So
Yeah.
I just try to learn a tiny bit from him.
Okay.
Let's start off.
So last week, the emphasis was overwhelmingly upon the conduct of treating those who were serving households and such. This week, the social network, if you will, or the rules and the judgments towards a smoothly functioning society broaden a little bit. So we will jump right into it. We're going to pick up our narrative in verse 17.
I was going to say, are we
Verse
at 17?
17, chapter 21, verse 17.
17.
So we've been talking about servants, and we ended on the note that throughout the scriptures, servants, though they are technically property in the eyes of the law, God is exceedingly careful to make sure that their humanity is always emphasized. And so all of the rules and regulations, ultimately, though harsh by our 21st century standards, but they're ultimately to afford protections to those individuals that found themselves in this servant type of servant-slave, menial worker, whatever you want to call it, but in this type of role. So now the rules and regs expand a bit. So verse 17.
Right. So, because 16 actually was on kidnappers.
Kidnappers,
and
right.
they would be put to death. And
Right.
And verse 15 was anyone who strikes father or mother must be put to death. So all this I think is interesting because it is showing that God believes in the death penalty in certain situations.
Rare,
but in certain
applicable
situations.
situations, yes.
Right. But in this context, I
Yes.
mean, that was the consequence for certain actions of
Yes.
certain sins or wrongs was the death penalty. But it's all based on how much he values life. And we're going to get to that.
Right.
Another illustration of that, example of that as we go along. So verse 17 says, and anyone who curses his father or mother anyone who curses his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death.
So now right out the gate.
So you can show this verse to your children. All the parents need to write this one down. It's Exodus 21, verse 17. When your kids are angry with you, just say.
Well, right now, out the gate, it sounds very, very harsh because I'm sure literally all of us are guilty at one time or another of cursing our parents.
Glad I'm not under this one anymore.
Or saying I hate you, or some silly
Right.
thing of that in the passion of the moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's very important that we clarify this. And the commentator Cole, he did an excellent job of putting together a clarification, if you will, based on the original Hebrew words. And this is the idea of the curse here is more like one would think of a death threat. Okay, and we do know that children do make and carry out death threats upon their parents for a variety of malicious and inappropriate reasons. So the idea is that it's more of a death threat. And then he explains, since to curse was to will and pray the downfall of the other with all one's heart, it represented the attitude from which sprang acts like striking or murder. Again, keeping in mind that these judgments are for the greater social good, the idea is that if you have somebody that is willing to kill their very own parents, then that individual should be dealt with harshly and immediately. So that's the idea behind that.
And it's also it says it represented the attitude from which sprang the acts. So again, most of these laws get to the heart.
Right.
What is in the person's heart? And that's
Right.
where Jesus took some of these laws and extrapolated. Like
Right.
that's why in the New Testament he said, if you are harboring anger in your heart against someone to the point that you wish they were dead,
Right.
then you have committed murder.
Right.
So So Jesus, this is why he took, made that extrapolation.
Right.
Because it is
Attitude
what
is everything.
Right, the attitude or the heart
Yeah.
behind someone's
And again, that's why he said some of his harshest words to the Pharisees. It's like, yeah, you know what? You count out 1/10 of your herbs and spices, but you know what? You hate your neighbor.
Right.
That doesn't fly with me.
Right.
I don't want your herbs and spices. I own it all anyway. Why would I care about your herbs and spices? I care about your heart.
Right.
So that's my loose paraphrase and translation.
That's what Jesus said.
Right. Verse 18.
What Dan said, Jesus said. Okay, verse 18.
Hopefully in good context.
Here. I'm going to read from here, I think.
Okay.
Now, if people have a quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with a fist, and he does not die but is confined to bed, verse 19, if he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall pay only for his loss of time and shall pay for his care until he is completely healed.
Okay, so we would describe this in modern terms as aggravated assault, perhaps.
Right.
And with intent to do harm. And the law, the current legal system, has multitude of definitions within this. But the idea here is that it's not premeditated, but it's more like an act of heated passion,
Right.
road rage.
Maybe, yeah,
Road
right.
rage
Right, so
or-
it's not premeditated.
Yeah.
The person didn't lie in wait to assault and kill
Right.
or assault and injure. It just an argument sprung up and they got so heated that
Right.
somebody shoves somebody and then that person falls and hits their head or
Right,
something like
right.
that. Or you strike them with the fist and then they're knocked out.
And it's applicable even to this day. I mean, I watch so many web pages and things of that nature, and martial arts sites and such, and they're like, if you hit somebody in a fight, even if you were justified and you knock them out or you harm them to the point where they're bleeding, don't run away. Stay there. You are going to get arrested. Okay, but let the courts sort it out. And it's kind of the same idea here, is that if you strike somebody so much so that they're essentially, if they're hospitalized, they're confined to their bed, but they recover, then you're liable for their loss of wages, their cost of care. Okay, but you won't be executed. So and keep that in mind as we proceed through these edicts and judgments and such, because that's the underlying principle here, is that does the penalty fit the crime?
Mm-hmm.
Because it will explain that in just a few verses here when we get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But God is always concerned with justice. Okay, and justice requires that sin be addressed. Hence, Jesus on the cross, which is grace and mercy beyond description.
Right.
But God is a God of justice. Otherwise, he would not be a God worthy of our adoration and our devotion, because he would just be a ruler.
Mm-hmm.
So, ready?
Yes.
Okay, verse 20.
Verse 20, and if someone strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies at his hand, he shall be punished. Verse 21, if, however, the slave survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for the slave is his property.
Okay, ouch.
This sounds
Again,
a little harsh.
It sounds harsh. It sounds...
So let me read it in the NLT.
Okay,
Because the NLT, I like the way they put these laws. It's a little more clear to me.
okay.
Verse 20 says, if a man beats his male or female slave with a club and the slave dies as a result, the owner must be punished. But if the slave recovers within a day or two, then the owner shall not be punished, since the slave is his property. I mean,
Right.
he will have already lost the day's wages, and he
Right.
will have been responsible to care for that slave for the recovery. So he's not. It's not like the owner will get no
Right.
losses,
Right.
but he won't be put to death, because taking a life of any kind
Right.
results in death. So
Right.
if the slave survives, basically he doesn't get put to death.
Right. Now, it makes us very uncomfortable in our culture, in our society, to think that you would have the right to beat another person, especially a person that's in a subordinate position.
Right.
I mean, if you
Because
went
this
into
is more
work,
of a servant. Remember,
Yeah.
this term slave in the
Yeah.
Bible here is more of that servant person who's being a servant.
yeah. So if you
Um,
went into work and your boss smacked you on the back of the head, unacceptable.
Right.
Unacceptable, right? But this has that implication, but again, it's also keeping it in the context of 3,000 years ago and the cultural nuances of that day when servants and slaves were considered property, even though the Bible is very, very careful to never forget their humanity.
Right.
So
That's what I was going to say. What's really interesting is compared to other countries where the slaves really are people who are taken against their will. It's really more of
Yeah.
a kidnapping.
Yeah.
Because they were conquered by the other, country or whatever. In that situation where the slave is really they're against their will. They haven't gone into servitude to pay a debt or something, or to have a better quality of life. Those people are just seen as property,
Yeah.
and there is no effect or results on the master if he beats a slave, whether they
Yes.
die or whether they recover in those other countries, so other cultures.
Yeah.
So this is what really this sets apart the Hebrew people and our
Yes.
God, Jehovah God of the Bible, is he is elevating servants, slaves, to a level that they don't have anywhere else.
Right. Horrifically, I was doing some research on this, and there are terrifying examples in multiple cultures where slaves were routinely just wantonly and just capriciously slaughtered, just at the whim of their master, to impress guests, to express rage, to make an ostentatious display of their alleged wealth. Many cultures just routinely just mowed down other human beings for their pleasure, and God is saying that will not go unpunished, and it's not acceptable. And the implication here, well, I guess Guzik said it best. He said the idea here was that if the victim did not die immediately, it was evidence that he was struck with the intention of discipline and not murder. So if a master strikes his servant as an act of discipline, it wasn't intended to kill them, it was intended to discipline them. And then additionally, if the slave died through this unintentional attack, the loss of property was thought to be penalty enough to the master. Gay said that earlier, that other commentators had noted that there was a financial and a workload loss and such, that would be compensation enough and hopefully teach the master discipline in and of themselves. So does that sound about right, Doc?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Chrissy. Chrissy Fogg is watching, it says.
Oh,
Hi there.
really? Hi. So, I don't
Good
see
to
her
see
name.
your
Where's her name?
profile.
Where's her name?
Well, I see it on my phone.
Oh, okay.
My phone shows me things
Hi,
that
Chrissy.
other things
Thanks for
don't show
doing-
me.
Right.
Robin Moore says, it's amazing Joseph wasn't killed by Potiphar.
It was absolutely amazing. It was the divine
Very
hand
much.
of God. So that's a great point, Robin.
Right.
Yeah, Joseph was accused of a horrific crime, adultery.
Well, and it's interesting how a lot of this applies to him. Like, he was kidnapped
Yes.
by his brothers, sold into slavery.
Right.
He wasn't a volunteer, to a foreign land.
Right.
So now he was at the bottom of the life, the bottom of the hierarchy of
Yeah.
any civilization, and definitely at the bottom in Egypt because he was sold.
Right.
And he was not Egyptian. So, and then he was accused of a crime.
Right.
And so, but the Egyptian law is different than the Hebrew law. So
It is.
But
it
it is
is
God's provision that he wasn't killed.
Yes, it's definitely God's provision, and it's a testament to Joseph's character.
Right.
That Potter had built up such an admiration for Joseph.
Yeah, I think when we covered that in Genesis, I do think that one of the trains of thoughts that I sort of adhere to is that yes, Potiphar had admired Joseph and he knew Joseph to be honest and of high integrity, and so we feel like it doesn't say exactly in Scripture, but the fact that Joseph wasn't killed lends itself to the idea that Potiphar didn't fully believe his wife's story.
True that.
So he believed that Joseph was probably innocent,
Yeah.
but he had to keep
Abide by
faith
the
and
law.
abide by the laws because his wife was making this claim, and because of her status in the civilization,
Right.
she had higher rights.
Right.
But that's probably why he wasn't killed.
Yeah. So good
Most
comment,
likely.
Robin. Good
Yes,
comment.
you're right.
Thank you. Thank you. Verse 22.
Verse 22. So, it starts with the same idea.
Oh, you know what? Just read it off of here because I think the wording, the context got messed up.
Oh no, I'm just like both start with now. So
Oh,
verse 18
okay.
started with now, so I
Oh,
thought I
okay.
was on the wrong page. So verse 22 says, "Now if people struggle with each other and strike a pregnant woman so that she gives birth prematurely, but there's no injury, the guilty person shall certainly be fined, as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide."
Okay, so now this
here we are talking about the
protection's
unborn-
extended to
Yes.
to unborn children
Unborn
and
baby.
On mothers. So again,
Women,
God
again.
yeah, women in general. I mean, but specifically
Pregnant
pregnant
women,
women. So
yeah.
so again, God's concern for all of life, and it says that if people are struggling, if there's a fight, and a pregnant woman inadvertently gets struck to the point where it causes her to go into premature labor, if the labor is carried through successfully and the child is no injury, so if the child is born healthy and the woman
Child lives.
recovers,
Yeah, and the woman, if they both
recovers,
live, baby and mother.
right, then the woman's husband has the right to make a demand of the guilty party, the person who struck his wife, and the judges are to decide how much that penalty will be.
Right.
So-
So he gets to do. So basically, you get to go to civil court
Right.
and say, "I want X amount of dollars for the lost." Basically, it's like lost wages because
Yeah.
his wife would have been unable to do her housely duties.
Right.
And that has. It's interesting because this is God saying and showing that there's value to that.
Yes.
So like this, so like the housewives or the stay-at-home mom, like in society, especially at biblical times,
Right.
there was zero value given to that by society. But God is saying, He's recognizing that there's value.
Right, and it's also it also by extension is protecting the guilty party in the sense that it's saying no, the husband doesn't go out and extract vengeance upon the guilty party, doesn't kill the guilty party.
Right.
Okay,
He doesn't get to just go.
but he does have an opportunity for to address the issue, okay, the wrongdoing, okay. But God is saying, we're going to do this in a merciful manner. We're going to do this with mercy. Society needs to operate with mercy, and again, that principle is carried on through the ages, and we see it in our own society today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sadly, we're dealing with a lot of other garbage. Okay, but that's for another day. But in context of this, a person could definitely take another to court and say, "I need $1 million for the trauma, the drama, the injury, I can't think of the term right now, but the emotional distress."
Punitive damages.
Punitive damage is the emotional distress that we were put through.
Yes.
So yeah, so she watches more lawyer shows
I watch
than I
a lot
do.
of lawyer shows.
Right.
Perry Mason, I used to watch every lunch
Oh,
hour
she watches all kinds of
for a
lawyers.
couple of years.
But we digress. But anyway, here we have.
It's
we
one of the
see
best ones is Perry Mason.
3,000 years ago, God is issuing the instructions that are, in essence, still enforced to this day.
Right.
And again, just like now, the judge and the judges, there were no juries, the judges were the jury, but the juries can decide, no, we're not going to award you $1 million. We might award you $1.5 million, or we might only award you $500,000. So that
Right.
still applies to even to this day. So
Exactly.
let's see. Next verse. You ready?
Right. And so if the child were killed or the mother were killed, then that would go back to the taking of a life results in the taking of the aggressor's life.
Right.
You know, so it's interesting. So it's the term is the court will follow the lex talionis, which is the punishment fits the crime.
Right, and we're going to talk about
We're
that in a
getting to
minute.
that
We're getting
even in
to
more
that.
detail, but yes.
So Carolyn asks the question, Abraham's servant would have inherited from him if he was childless. What's the difference between a slave and a servant, if any? And in this context, there's very little difference. It's just a matter of the wording.
Right, because in that context of Abraham, and that term for servant and slave was used talking about the same individual interchangeably.
It was.
Because in the context of Scripture, and we talked about it a little bit more last week, was that if a person can go into service and they're called a slave, a Hebrew slave, but they choose to become part of a family and serve them because they don't have enough money on their own, or they need to pay off a debt. And sometimes some of the other laws, like maybe they killed someone's donkey and they don't have the sheep required to pay off the donkey, so they become a slave, but it's just for 6 years. In the 7th year, they are set free if they are Hebrew slaves.
In this context,
right? In
prior,
this context,
in Abraham's day, they may
right.
have remained servants for life. So
right.
the terms are used interchangeably there, and so he would have been inherited as a loyal servant.
Yep, because they are considered family members.
Yeah.
The loyal servants, slaves that are Hebrew slaves that are serving the family are considered family members. They're given rights and to be treated kindly, just like a family member. Now, granted, like in the social hierarchy, they're just below the actual living offspring of the parents, but if there are none, then they would be in line to inherit as a child. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. So volition is the main separating difference. A slave, for our purposes, would be any individual who is wrongfully stolen from their family, culture, society.
We're talking about people stealing.
People
is what
stealing.
we call it. That's the slavery that exists today.
Yeah,
that
we would define slavery as people stealing, whereas what is talked about here would be servitude.
So Robin's bringing up another example from Genesis. What did Hagar's position change when she got pregnant? And I think the answer to that is, technically, Hagar's position did not change, technically, in the family. But her son would have been Abraham's heir.
Right.
And that's why Sarah got jealous of Hagar and ended up making Abraham send her away.
Yes.
And treating her poorly, and then making Abraham send her away. So Sarah got jealous, but technically Hagar's position was still a servant.
Yes.
So, but doesn't mean that like emotionally Abraham didn't start to favor her, or Sarah thought he might begin to favor her.
Right.
So she got jealous.
Right, because Hagar produced an heir and Sarah couldn't at that point in history.
But she didn't change her position in society and in the family. Really didn't change.
Right.
But her son would have been the heir.
Correct. So, ladies, you are asking
Woo-hoo!
excellent
Good
questions.
questions.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Carolyn. You're both asking wonderful questions. We thank you
It's
so
so
much.
fun. I'm glad we did Genesis first, right?
Yeah, me too.
Comes in handy.
All right, here we go. Verse 23.
Okay. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, and bruise for bruise.
Okay, so now this...
Well, this list goes on. Why does it go on so long? What do
it
you guys
goes on
think?
so
Why
long.
does God do that? Why does he go through all those
Well,
different.
a lot of critics have brought up the point that, hey, remember back in grade school or back in high school, you learned about the Code of Hammurabi, and
Oh, yeah.
and everybody goes, oh yeah, the Code of Hammurabi was, that was the oldest recorded code of conduct and ethics and laws and things of that nature. Moses just stole from that.
That's where Moses got his
Moses stole,
idea,
because
right?
in fact Hammurabi's code was recorded. It was literally carved in stone some 300 years prior to Moses recording these events. And as somebody raised in the palaces of Egypt, he would have undoubtedly been privy to or at least aware of Hammurabi's code of conduct and this idea, but well, Guzik says it best. If lasting damage resulted, the eye for eye principle. Catch this. This is exceedingly important. I should have underlined it. Always limited retribution. This law was meant to block man's natural desire for vengeance. It was not given as a license for revenge. And here is where we need to spend a significant amount of time. Okay, the other commentator, Bradford, puts it a little bit more succinctly. He says God gives only a few reasons for a death sentence. We've talked on a couple of them. And none, catch this, none whereby a person is mutilated as a punishment, such as gouging out the eye. Again, an eye for an eye. You have to understand this. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, bruise for a bruise idea is fair and equitable compensation. Okay? That's the key. That's the key.
Right. So, like, for example, if you were in a fight and one person broke your finger, it wouldn't be fair and equitable if the judge said, okay, so the man who broke your finger, we're gonna gouge out his eyes, so now he's blind.
So
like they would. that wouldn't be fair.
No.
That would be incorrect.
But
that's what people might want. They might want to.
But that's where the Mosaic law here, that given to him by God, radically departs from the Code of Hammurabi. Because if you read the Code of Hammurabi, it was literally an eye for an eye. You poke somebody's eye out, your eye comes out. You knock somebody's tooth out, your tooth is literally pulled out of your head. Okay, you curse your parents, you are literally, your hands are cut off. You commit adultery, both of you are literally impaled upon a stake. So, Hammurabi's code was exceedingly violent, exceedingly harsh, and it's considered, it's a wonder of ancient thinking and so on and so on. But it truly did not seek fair and just compensation. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes brutal
vengeance.
Compensation.
More like vengeance. Right.
More like vengeance and fear factor. There's a definite fear factor in here. I'm not going to hit that guy because if I break his nose, I might get my nose broken.
Right.
So or if I break his leg, wow, yeah, that would not be pretty. So we have to understand that Mosaic laws recorded here were inspired by the Holy Spirit, and the idea was to have a functioning society that recognized injury, recognized pain and suffering, recognized improper behavior, and took lengths to try and alleviate chaos and brutality. And again, just compensation.
Right.
So, yeah.
I like how my Life Application Study Bible notes say that, it's just a good comment, judges, parents, and teachers, and others who work with people must make wise decisions in order for discipline to be effective. A punishment too harsh is unfair, and one too lenient is powerless to teach. So we should ask God for wisdom before we judge, before we make a judgment.
Right. Right. There's a cricket in the room.
I know, like, what is that?
Like, what is that noise? It's a cricket.
Maybe.
So, okay. So,
Okay, anyway, so it's just that's a great comment. We need to be careful.
yeah.
That's why God says vengeance is mine. Exactly. Marie says, would compensation be monetary? And it could be, like,
Most likely, yeah.
like, so say a person's, like if they're, or it's like monetary, or it's like making up for what they're not able to do anymore. Like, say a person is injured and now they cannot herd their sheep, their leg is broken, or they permanently can't use their leg. Well, now they can't provide for their family, so the person who did that, the judges might say, well, now you must provide for that family.
You now become his
caretaker,
his hired shepherd.
Or his hired shepherd,
Yeah.
and you must
Yeah.
do all of his work that he can't do
Right.
until his family doesn't need you anymore, so
Right.
yeah, exactly. So in that way, it would be considered monetary,
So the key point here is that, yes, this is very, very similar to Hammurabi's laws. Not surprisingly. So all societies have forms of laws and that are very similar to this. Why would they not? Right? But it's the degree of harshness that separates the Mosaic laws from the Code of Hammurabi. And again, Hammurabi was exceedingly violent and exceedingly frequently employed destroying somebody's eye or tooth or hand or foot.
More like a mutilation.
Mutilation, yeah. It was frequently.
The punishment was a form of mutilation.
Which really benefited no one. Just it kind of
now
created,
there's 2 or 3 people with no eye or no hand or no
and
foot.
it created just a very inequitable situation. And Robin says that's why God says vengeance is mine. Absolutely, Robin.
Yeah.
Yes. Ultimately, vengeance is God's, and God is laying out these precepts to remind people of that, but also to help with justice being served cold. Okay, so that somebody wouldn't go out and put out another
heat
person's
of the battle.
eye.
Yeah, right.
So going on in the classifications of injury, let's see, we talked about that. There we go.
So verse 26 is, and if someone strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free on account of the eye.
Okay, again, keeping in mind that idea is like this will be compensation.
Right.
The individual's freedom will be given to them,
Right.
and the penalty to the offending party will be that they lose that resource.
Right, they lose the slave. Right.
They lose that
the
source
servant.
of income, that source of assistance, whatever it might be.
Right.
Verse 27.
And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let the slave go free on account of the tooth. So the slave's
Same
compensation is their freedom.
And again, this is a radical concept. So,
Right.
So this is a radical concept because
the what was it called?
Code of Hammurabi.
Yeah, Hammurabi. I was going to
Yeah.
say something else.
Yeah.
The Code of Hammurabi would not allow the person to be free to be compensation. It would
Right.
always just have to mutilate the offending party.
Right. And again, the underlying principle here is it recognizes the humanity of the male female servant. It recognizes their humanity.
Right.
And if now they've lost something precious to them, then they are given their freedom.
Right.
So now it moves on towards farm animals, which again, keeping in context, this is an agrarian culture. Farm animals were a significant.
Well, and it just shows how much God cares about animals.
Well, that's true.
Which He does.
That's true. But it's
Cares
also
about
it spends a long time talking about oxen, and you think, really?
Very important.
But again, it's a necessity for, as we'll see, these penalties lay down because oxen were the strongest beasts of burden at that time.
Yeah,
frame.
oxen are like the tractors and the trucks of
Yeah,
this time.
absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
if somebody messed up your whole fleet of trucks or made your tractors inoperable, as a farmer, now, someone's got to pay for that.
Right. So verse 28.
Want me to go
Absolutely.
read it? Okay. Verse 28. So now, if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall certainly be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall go unpunished.
Okay.
So this is about the animals
Right.
being evil and harming human beings. Actually, the next couple parts
Yeah. Yeah.
are about
So-
the animals misbehaving and goring someone.
Right.
Then the animal needs to be put to death, which there are literally laws, thankfully, in most cities or many cities. They're called vicious dog laws. And so and they exist for this reason, essentially. If you are walking your dog and there's a dog that comes and attacks your dog, technically you are supposed to report that dog to animal control
Right.
of your area, because if that dog has a habit of doing this, even if the owner comes up to you and says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, let me pay for everything," the thing is, if this dog has a history of doing this over and over again, eventually it's the owner that does have to be punished.
Right. And
Not
we'll see
initially,
that. We'll
but
see that unfold here in
we're
these
going to
next
see that in
couple of
another verse
verses.
or two. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
So again, so
Jumping
this
ahead.
is a vicious ox, okay? And if it's vicious to the point where it kills somebody,
Yeah.
then it's just to be killed.
Right.
It's to be killed, but the owner shall go unpunished again because they are losing a significant source of their livelihood.
Right.
That's punishment enough.
So
Verse 29.
29. If, however, an ox was previously in the habit of goring and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death.
So
So if that would happen, then people would keep their vicious dogs behind a gate, because
Right.
they don't ever get put to death, but the animal does eventually get put to death. But they could just go out and train another dog to be vicious. So
well, so people go like, wow, that's harsh. That's harsh. You would
I
kill
wish it
somebody
was true
because
today.
because it killed but
only
it's-
if it's done it before. See if it's in the habit of it.
it's in the habit
So
of it.
it's not the first
So it's
offense.
indicative of the person not really
Georgia's
having-
watching. Hi, Georgia.
so oh hey Georgia. So not really having consideration for the rest of society. So the individual, if it says it's in the habit of goring,
Right.
and the owner's been warned.
This has been happening
So-
repeatedly.
So the problem is that the owner has disregard for other human beings. So
This is how much God values human life.
right that
So if anyone takes a life, if it's an animal that's taking a human life, the animal has to be punished.
Right.
And if it's a person that owns an animal and it takes a human life on more than one occasion or harms a human, and the person is obviously then not being responsible, keeping it penned up, keeping it under control, then that person is held responsible.
Right. Now, this might sound weird to us, but in farm cultures, in agrarian cultures, this is not so weird. We a long time ago, we had a client who subsequently has passed away, but he told us the story. He grew up in farmland in, I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota, and he recounted that he made a lot of enemies in his small community because one of his neighbor's cows had broken down a fence and had gone out into another field, and it was just common courtesy to round them up the best you could and or notify the owner, and he didn't do it because he was mad at the guy who owned the cows, and it ended up causing some significant trouble. And so he sort of became a town pariah because he didn't do what was his social obligation in a farming community. So he said, so I moved. So
he moved.
That's not really solving the problem.
Right?
But yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So verse 30, if a ransom is demanded of him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is demanded of him. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it shall be done to him according to the same rule. So as opposed to being put to
Killed.
death, the owner of this repeat offender ox, can say, well, how much money would you like, or what would you like instead of my life?
Right.
And the judges can decide if they will accept something else.
Right. Right.
And it accepts his life, but it's not a guarantee.
Right. Exactly. So moving on to verse 32.
Still on the ox. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned.
Okay, again, this is a troublesome ox, and this is significant because, as Cole said, a slave was still a man or human. Okay, his blood brings blood guilt like that of any other man, and so the slave owner was to be compensated. Okay, 30 shekels of silver is significant because what did Judas? What did Judas take?
Yes, Judas was paid 30 shekels of silver,
Which was the
to
price
betray Jesus Christ.
Which was the price
So I
of
found that very
purchasing
significant.
a
Right.
servant. Yeah,
Right. Or the
Yeah.
same price of if a slave was killed, right?
yeah.
By
so very,
an
very
ox.
significant.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, now kind of expanding upon that idea, verse 33.
33. Now, if someone opens a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall become his.
Okay, so again, social
It's in his pit,
responsibility.
so it's going to be his.
So social responsibility, it's like if somebody digs a pit or uncovers a hole and the animal falls into it. So this could be a significant financial hardship to the owner of the ox or the donkey, right? And so the person who opened the pit or dug the pit or whose property the pit is on shall not only pay the owner the cost of the animal, the deceased animal. The deceased animal becomes the offended party's property because he can turn around and he can sell the meat.
Sell the meat or the
He
hide
sell
or
the
something.
meat or the hide
He could
or
make
the
use
horns.
of it, but
He
it's
can
down
make
at
you-
the bottom of the pit, so he's got to do the work
He's
to
got to
get
do
to
the
it.
work to get to it, but because it sounds weird to us, like what am I going to do with a dead animal? Well,
Right.
again, no refrigeration,
Similar thing happens. I
Right.
mean, just in the fact that it becomes his property. If you hit a deer in a lot of states,
You get to keep
you
the
get
deer.
to keep the carcass.
right? You're going to spend thousands of dollars
Your
getting
car
your
is
car fixed.
sometimes totaled, but if you survive the crash and the deer is dead, then you, as the one who hit the deer, that's the only saving thing out of
Yeah,
it. If
you
you
get
want,
some
is you get the
compensation. Yeah.
carcass, so you can eat the venison. So verse 35, and if someone's ox injures another ox so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide its proceeds equally, and they shall also divide the dead ox. Or if it is known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, yet its owner has not confined it, he must make restitution of the ox for ox, and the dead animal shall become his.
Okay.
So if it's, again, back to that known aggression of an animal, the owner of that animal is held responsible if it's a repeat offender.
Right. And so this is an equitable solution to making sure. Now, why would God go into such elaboration on this? Well, ultimately, it's
Why?
for the benefit of the society. And I love how Cole puts it. It's like, to a struggling Israelite farmer, fair payment for the death of an ox might mean the difference between life and death, or at least between freedom and slavery for debt. Okay, because again, oxen were not just cool farm animals to have. They were the lifeblood of the farm. They were the
Right.
plow animals. They provided, in some cases, they provided milk. In some places, in some circumstances, their waste was used as fuel. You can burn the
Yes.
dried waste of the oxen. Their meat can be used. So to lose your ox would be could send you into debt that you might have to enter into servitude or
Right.
slavery.
You lose
Yeah,
from a
of
lot
your
of
own.
different levels of your family.
So these arrangements, these laws, these precepts are to try and allow for just and fair compensation. So the offending party can't just say like, oh, too bad. Sorry about that. That's just my ox. That's just the way he is.
That's what he is. Yeah,
So
he's
sorry.
always doing that.
Right. Sorry. Oh, gosh, that was tough. No. Responsibility, personal responsibility, and a sense of community and justice for everyone for your actions that's what chapter 21 is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that is our last slide. How about that?
That's
So
it.
we actually got done 3 minutes early.
Whoa.
Wow, that never happens. So
Correct. So it's a miracle.
So hopefully we've done a fair job of explaining what the term slavery and means in this context,
Mm-hmm.
and how it really is more a form of servitude, entered into to most often to relinquish a debt or to better the circumstances of somebody in extreme poverty. Okay. We've elaborated on the idea of just and fair compensation for injuries, which are inevitably going to happen in any society,
Right.
especially in an agrarian society where people are working in close proximity to large animals and sharp tools, and also a society where people's passions and emotions might get out of hand because it's a struggle for life and death. But hopefully we've done an adequate job of that, and we will see you all next week.
Right.
With chapter 22.
22. We'll work through the laws of the land.
Thank you all for your amazing comments
Thanks,
and
you
your
guys.
participation.
Appreciate it.
We're so glad that you're here. Lori, have a great Tuesday morning birthday.
Have a great birthday.
Okay? Everybody else, it's really wonderful to see you on board, and have a terrific and blessed week. We will see
Have
you
a blessed
next
week.
Thursday.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.